Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania's 20-plus anniversary. I'm so honored to be joined today by our first executive directors, Harvey Strauss and Liz Fritsch, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this all came together, how LASP came to be. Welcome, Harvey and Liz. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just start out. Harvey, how did you make legal aid your professional choice? How did you become a legal aid lawyer?
Well, when I was in law school, I did a clinical program. I really enjoyed it. And I decided I wanted to get into legal aid or a public defender situation, something like that. So I was fortunate. My first job was with legal aid in Utica, New York. Shortly after that, I went to the old Legal Aid Society. A couple years after that, I came to what was the Montgomery County Legal Aid Service. So that's how I got into it. And I came to Norristown in 1976.
How about you, Liz?
Well, being a child of the 60s and early 70s, I thought I could change the world and considered social work, psychology. My dad was an attorney, loved the law. I found out later that he was one of the founding members of Bucks County Legal Aid. So he persuaded me that the law was the way to change the world and make things better. So I headed off to law school with that in mind and found my way back to legal aid after doing some volunteering. Found my way into the employment of legal aid much later in life, but felt that I belonged there when I got there.
How would you all sort of describe your programs before the merger? Harvey, you in Montgomery County, and Liz, you in Bucks County. What comes to mind when you think of what the programs were before the merger?
Our program was quite small. When I came in 1976, there was a director then, and I was the staff attorney, and there was a secretary and a half. It was a program that had been started by the Bar Association. There were hundreds of volunteer attorneys. And when we got state and federal money in the late 1970s, we expanded. We opened an office in Pottstown. We had an office in Willow Grove for a little while, and we grew to about 20 staff, maybe 10, 11 attorneys. The key thing in those days was local funding, support from the bar associations, a lot of pro bono help from the private bar. And we survived and in fact, kind of flowered until the time when the merger talks began. But we were a small one county program.
And what kind of cases did you all focus on?
The overwhelming majority of our cases in those days was family law, custody, visitation, domestic violence, children and youth cases, a lot of landlord and tenant, a lot of housing, some consumer work, some SSI, SSD, unemployment compensation. That was probably the majority of the types of cases we did, again, because we didn't have a very big staff. So we did kind of what in those days I think was considered the core area of legal aid work.
Liz, I'll ask you the same questions.
Yeah, like Montgomery County, we were a very small program. I think we were very, focused on local issues. We had an excellent staff, but were very restrained by our size. Depended very much on our local bar association, which was very supportive, and a lot of pro bono attorneys. And we really didn't have that much contact with the other legal service programs in the other 3 suburban counties. It's surprising to think back about how little we really spoke to one another until we came to the years leading up to the merger.
So talk about the merger some. I know it was not always a smooth road, but what were some highlights for you all in terms of how the programs came together?
I think one of, the merger, as Liz mentioned earlier, It was tough. It was a process that took a couple years. We hired a consultant, Gary Singson, who had been an officer at the Legal Services Corporation. We had the pro bono help on all the legal issues from Ballard Spar, who just were incredible. We had mediation help from Lou Ruley at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a long, involved process, and I think most of the local programs, I speak mostly for Montgomery County, were a little reticent about the idea of merger. But we fought through the process. We had lots of resources, lots of meetings. As you all know, we eventually went to mediation led by Lou Ruley. And after 2 years, we finally decided to merge. And looking back, I think it was an extraordinary process, draining, politically charged at times, but we wound up with a really good merged 4-county, now middle-sized program with quite a few resources, great staff, because we were able to keep most of the staff of the 4 small programs. And I think in those days, we were pretty excited about LASP. We were pretty enthusiastic about the fact that we were going to be able to do not only what we'd always done, but get into some new areas. And it was a successful process. I looked at other mergers, and I always thought ours was one of the most successful in the country.
Liz, anything to add?
I do think there were individuals from each of the 4 counties who were instrumental in bringing their county to the table. I think once we all realized that merger was going to be in our best interest, that was the way to hold on to federal and state funding, which was becoming increasingly important and available to us, that we sat down and got the job done. And thank goodness we had strong participation from the bar associations, because our greatest fear was that the bar associations would not support a regional program. And fortunately, that turned out to be an unfounded fear. The 4 bar associations did support the merger and really made it successful. Of course, it didn't hurt that we had an excellent staff from in each of the 4 counties, and we were able to hold on to almost all of them, and they made the program as successful as it was.
If I could just mention, Shawn, I think some of the individuals who were most important to us were the 4 executive directors of the local bar associations in those days: Nancy Paul, Wendy Hoffman, the late Betty Price, the director in Bucks County. They and the officers of those 4 bar associations bought into the merger. And I think that they, with some of the local political leaders like the late Senator Greenleaf, some of the other people, really made it a difficult process somewhat easier, because we knew we had the support of the 4 local legal communities.
Well, I know we're running short on time, but what do you all see as, in a nutshell, your proudest innovations or achievements as executive directors here?
Again, I think the success of the merger was extraordinary. It was an incredibly difficult process. We got through it. We kept most of the staff of the 4 local programs. We were worried about losing local funding, and we had a lot of local funding in those days. We didn't lose any local funding, or very little. We were successful with the help of our resource development people in getting new funding pretty quickly. I think we gained credibility with the Legal Services Corporation, the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, IALTA, the 4 bars, Pennsylvania Bar Association. I was just proud of us operating, I guess in those days, 6 offices, 50 or 60 staff, serving over 10,000 people a year. I think the fact that we survived and thrived in those early years was something that I was quite proud of.
Liz, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, I do think that we didn't realize what advantages our increased size and regionalization was going to give us. It allowed us to apply for foundation funding that we never could have gotten when we were small programs. It gave us a depth of staff, which I think was invaluable. Instead of having one attorney doing property-related work, we had 4 experts in 4 counties who were able to share best practices with one another and to stand in for one another. So I think the depth and richness of expertise and experience the merger gave us was wonderful. It allowed us, of course, to strengthen the helpline, which has continued to be one of our greatest assets. And it just gave us the capacity to do things that we did not have before. And I think that's been a wonderful strength. We've been able to attract excellent staff, hold on to wonderful advocates. And so it really did turn out to be a great decision, a great merger, and it goes forward and becomes better with every year. And thanks to Shawn's guidance and Keisha along with him, and Eric and so many others. And the Bar Association support has continued to grow. I was just at a meeting this morning, a legislative breakfast, and legal aid was a subject of conversation. It was wonderful to hear. So I think the merger was very successful, and I look forward to hearing more about its accomplishments with the coming years.
Well, thank you again, Harvey and Liz, for joining us and sharing these insights. You certainly created a strong foundation for where we are today with LASP, and we look forward to a bright future with continued innovations and improvements to serve our clients in the 4 counties. I want to give special thanks to our sponsors tonight. Your generosity was really heartwarming and amazing. It enabled us to put on this great event. And I thank everyone for attending. Members of the bar, our friends in the judiciary and the legal services community, we thank you so much for your support over the years. And we look forward to another successful 20 years with LASP. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. I want to wish you a good evening. My name is Bill Baldwin, and as the president of the Board of Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania, or LASP, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to our Fête for Justice. Tonight we celebrate 20 years of LASP providing comprehensive and quality civil legal services to the residents of Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties. It's because of the dedication of our amazing staff and the generous support of members of the community like you that legal aid has been able to make a difference in the lives of countless people they've represented by giving them the tools they need to understand their legal rights, by helping them navigate through the court system, but most importantly, by guaranteeing them access to justice. So on behalf of the board of directors, the staff, and the thousands of individuals LASP has represented over the years, please accept our sincere gratitude for celebrating with us this evening and for your ongoing support. We have a couple of people we'd like to acknowledge for their sponsorship. Specifically, the Champion of Justice sponsors, Judith Algeo and Frank Servone. Ballard Spar. Begley, Carlin, and Mandio. Brown and Brown of Pennsylvania. Fitter Mitts. Penn Community Bank. And Troutman Pepper. We also have a number of special guests here this evening that we'd like to acknowledge. We have a number of representatives from the Judiciary. The Honorable Carolyn Nichols from Superior Court of Pennsylvania. The Honorable Rochelle Friedman, retired of the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. The Honorable Denise Bowman, Bucks County Court of Common Pleas. The Honorable Theodore Fritsch Jr., Bucks County Court of Common Pleas. The Honorable Jordan Yeager, Bucks County Court of Common Pleas. The Honorable Anne-Marie Wheatcraft, Chester County Court of Common Pleas. Julia Malloy Good, Hearing Officer in Chester County Family Court. We also have the District Attorney of Chester County, Deborah Ryan. From the various bar associations, we welcome Dave Travascus, who's the pro bono coordinator for the Pennsylvania Bar Association. From the Bucks County Bar Association, we have Julie Goldstein, President. Brendan Callahan, Board Member. Melanie Wender, Board Member. And Greg Nardi, Executive Director. From the Chester County Bar Association, Matt Holliday, Executive Director. From the Delaware County Bar Association, Carrie Woody, President. We have Rachel Temmey, Vice President. Tracy Price, Marketing Director, and Tracy will also be receiving an award this evening in honor of her late mother, Elizabeth Price. And of course, this is a little awkward. I'm the Executive Director, William Baldwin, so I'll introduce myself again. From the Montgomery County Bar Association, we have Serenia Feynman, the President. Lindsay Child, Board Member and Chair of the Family Law Section. Mark Turetsky, Board Member. And Denise Vicario, the Executive Director. We also have a number of colleagues from other legal programs that have joined us this evening. We'd like to welcome Laval Miller Wilson from the Health Law Project. Frank Servone from the Support Center for Child Advocates. Lori Malloy, North Penn Legal Services. Brian Gorman, Southwest PA Legal Services, who is joining us virtually. And Wilhelm Joseph, the Executive Director of Maryland Legal Aid. Again, I want to tell you how much we appreciate you being here this evening, for all of your support. This is a wonderful organization, and I cannot say how proud I am to be associated with it. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to our wonderful executive director, Shawn Boehringer.
Welcome. Welcome. I was instructed as I was leaving the office today by our consultant from your part-time controller that I needed to say something self-deprecating and humorous. And I said, I'm not good at that. I have plenty of self-deprecating content, but the humorous part is where I fall short. But Danny Johnson, our wonderful event planner, and I have created a new technique for self-affirmation, which is the slam dunk. Danny would give us a checklist of things to do. Marion Fraley, Ann Tideman Solomon, Keisha James would volunteer to take on that task. Slam dunk, we got it done. Sometimes I was a little creative. There you go, Danny. Danny in the back, just shooting 3. Sometimes I got a little creative. I got back to the Julius Erving days and did a little reverse slam, but we did the slam dunk. There's not a lot of funny things going on in the world today, unfortunately. We have a terrible war in Ukraine. The Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard does not amuse me. And of course, we have COVID continuing to rear its head. And in Philadelphia, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, there's a player that the Sixers acquired this year who kind of looks like me, right? He's got a beard. His beard's fuller than mine. His beard's darker than mine. We have some things in common. Our best athletic days are behind us. I could never dunk. My friend Mark Sproul is here. Mark and I have known each other since we were 10. Stand up, Mark. Where's Mark? Mark can attest to the fact that I've never been able to dunk. And of course, James Harden probably can't dunk now either. But the one thing that James Harden has is a contract option to play for $47 million next year. Now, that's almost $47 million more than I will make in salary next year. But it's also 6 times the entire operating budget of 1 year of the Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania. And I will assert tonight that the services that we provide are worth much more than the services that Mr. Harden provides to the Delaware Valley. Between you and me, I'm asking you all tonight to help us close that gap. It shouldn't be 6 times. Let's try to, maybe we can close it down to maybe 2 times. Okay? I'm asking you to make that commitment with me tonight. But I'll promise you, I'll put in more effort tonight than Mr. Harden did in games 5 and 6 against Miami. And I'll try to put in more Philadelphia native Dawn Staley effort, coach of the University of South Carolina, national champion, women's basketball team. She certainly acquitted herself better than our Doc Rivers has with the Sixers. I have attended many legal aid events over the years, and on more than one occasion, a speaker has argued the importance of civil legal aid through citation to the U.S. Constitution's preamble, drafted about 25 miles or so from where we
sit tonight, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. It is an appropriate citation. Of paramount importance to the founders, first on the list was justice. Our honorees, our staff on the front line, our board, all of you in this room value the work of LASP and legal aid programs in protecting due process and fairness in our civil justice system and ensuring the results are not predicated on a litigant's wealth or membership in a protected class. The speeches that I've heard right to the preamble stop at established justice. I would assert that there is much more. When I hear of LASP advocates securing a protection from abuse order for a domestic violence victim or resolving a landlord-tenant dispute through means other than self-help, I think of LASP as ensuring domestic tranquility. While I don't pretend to equate LASP's work with the brave service of those in the military, I do hear about the work of LASP's Veterans Advocacy Project to bring dignity and a measure of economic security to those who live with the physical, emotional, and mental scars of their courageous service. This should not be overlooked in providing for the common defense. When I think of promoting the general welfare, I think of LASP advocates helping an unemployed individual unjustly denied compensation, or assisting a disabled individual secure a modest SSI benefit to pay rent or utilities. I think of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his 1941 State of the Union. The inspiration tonight for our theme of 4 freedoms, 4 counties, 4 justice. The 4 freedoms FDR espoused, which include the freedom from fear and from want, were incorporated into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted under the leadership of Eleanor Roosevelt in 1947 and 8, and which included a right to an adequate standard of living for the unemployed and the disabled. And that takes us to the preamble's 5th objective, securing the blessings of liberty. In 2018, Pennsylvania enacted a progressive clean slate law to provide for expungement of minor and old criminal records. It passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, 188 to 2 in the House and 49 to 0 in the Senate. LASP Community Engagement Union has made clean slate. I'm looking at a few of those folks right now, supplemented by an innovative pardon project thanks to the Pennsylvania IOLTA Board. They've made those cases a focus of their work. The unit has produced many successes. Stories of clients granted fresh starts to improve employment and housing and to obtain education and job training. The blessings of liberty can in fact only be pursued when someone has a measure of economic security. Our keynote speaker tonight, Dr. Reuben Jonathan Miller, has written about how many cannot achieve the blessings of liberty. His perspective comes not only from the prestige of being an associate professor at the Social Work School at the University of Chicago, one of the world's great institutions, I might add. It comes from his own life, experiencing poverty, racism, the child welfare system, and as a brother and son of family who have experienced prison and the effects of mass incarceration. Dr. Miller writes that sitting with history, allowing myself to be moved by it, and finding myself within it is the only way to capture what it means to be alive. Dr. Miller, we are so grateful to have you with us, to be moved by your history and insight, and to capture a deeper understanding of how our work may be directed in pursuit of securing the blessings of liberty for those we serve. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Reuben Jonathan Miller.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's just an honor to be with you tonight. I'd like to also thank the folks who put together this event from LASP, but also the organizers that they brought in. So special thanks to Special Gathering. And mostly thank you to all of you who are here today who do very important work. And thank you especially for the focus of tonight's event, the 4 rights: rights to decent and affordable housing and healthcare, to basic income support, to protection from domestic violence, to fresh starts, as your website shows, clients burdened with debt and long past criminal records. We might call this the Lord's work in a different setting. It's work that's not only key to the democratic project, but it's work on behalf of people whose lives and the way we treat them are the very measure of our democracy. James Baldwin put it this way. He said, well, if one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one does not go to the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, he says. Those precisely who need the law's protection most, to listen to their testimony. This is what you do. Ask any Mexican, any Puerto Rican, any Black man, any poor person, he says. Ask the wretched how they fare in the halls of justice, and then you will know not whether or not the country is just, but whether it has any love for justice, he says, or any concept of it. Now, Baldwin isn't the first commentator to suggest that we measure our democracy by how we treat the least well off in our country. This is the work of justice. It's certainly the work that we need. And I think that my work might help underscore the importance of your work on behalf of the least of those among us. In fact, that phrase, the least of these, is where I started my work. It started with a scripture. I'm a religious guy. I was raised by my grandmother who saved us from foster care. So thank you for that important work that you do. And the scripture is Matthew 25. And I won't tell you the whole scripture, but I'll give you the cliff notes. The cliff notes are, it's what in the Pentecostal tradition, the tradition I was raised in, we call the Valley of Decision. And the whole thing hinges on how you treated people. And the most famous lines from this scripture are, when I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was hungry, did you feed me? But there's another important line. When I was sick and in prison, did you visit me, it says. And that touched me, it moved me. I realized I wasn't doing anything really for the sick and imprisoned. Those folks who we lock away, who have made mistakes, who have maybe even done violent things, who are easy to forget because they're guilty, many. But this is a mandate. I was sick and in prison, did you visit me? And so I became a volunteer chaplain at the Cook County Jail, hoping to answer that question, hoping to say maybe yes, or something that approximated it. And I did that work from 2003 to 2008. This, of course, is the height of mass incarceration. This 2008 being the year that we arrested more people in any given year than any year before and any year since. 2.4 million people held in an American jail or prison in that year. And I went to social work school because I wanted to be a better chaplain. But I got interested in different things and started doing research, trying to understand mass incarceration because I was confronted with its realities. There I was in the Cook County Jail doing my work. A jail that houses overwhelmingly poor people, 80% of that population, like 80% of the folks who qualify for indigent defense in this country were poor. And most of those folks looked like me. And so there I was confronted with the realities of the jail, and I started to see my neighbors show up in the Cook County Jail. And so I wanted to understand it. So I went to graduate school to study it. And I got a PhD in sociology to understand mass incarceration. Really, what brings so many people into a place like that? Why so many poor people? Why so many poor people of color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And while I'm doing the research for a book that I wrote called Halfway Home, My brother was arrested and incarcerated. So I'm following people. In fact, I've been following people for many years. And I'm following people out of jails and prisons to understand their lives and how their family helped them put their lives back together, the strains and constraints on them. And then I become one of the families, which is unsurprising. It's unsurprising to anyone paying attention to trends in this country. I was born poor and Black after 1972. This is the year that mass incarceration begins in earnest. This is when we arrest and incarcerate more people each year for 27 straight years than we did the year before. This was our experiment in mass incarceration. And I could tell you about my brother, and I could tell you about what it was like to meet my father, but you have to read the book for that. But I don't want to tell you about them. I'd rather tell you about people that I followed in my work. People who I learned to care for. And I'd like to tell you about two of the brothers that I followed. The first is a man I call Jimmy Caldwell. Now, it's the winter of 2014, and I'm doing research out of the Detroit Reentry Center, and my research is ethnographic. I do what people do. So I spent about 3.5 years in halfway houses in Chicago. And I spent 2 years following people out of jails, prisons, and detention centers in Detroit, following them from the day they're released from lockup. This is one of those days. And we're on the east side of the city. And what I do is I'd head to the muster room. This is the cell where people are waiting to be released. It's the last day, it's the last few minutes. And I'd meet them there and I'd introduce myself to them and I'd sign them up for my study. And I do that before they walked out. And the scene is beautiful. A father would hug his boy close. A grandmother would reach up from her seat to embrace her long since grown child, her walker sometimes in between them. There was always some exchange between the people released from their cages and the people who picked them up, even when they were in a hurry to leave. There'd be some intimate conversation or some exchange, maybe somewhat a nervous glance from a lover to the floor. Maybe a parent would acknowledge how much a child had grown since the last transfer. All of this signaled that their loved one was known and cared for. Some people hurried up and shot out of it, making a beeline for the exit, but the relief on their faces was always there. Their loved one had been to prison, perhaps for a long time. Now they were coming home. Taking in this scene, I almost missed Jimmy Caldwell. He left by himself. It took 4 tries for me to reach him. The numbers of his closest friends were disconnected. I finally reached his mother, and she was lovely. She put us in touch right away. So I want to tell you about Jimmy, who shows up to my office in Midtown. I'm set up in Detroit. This is our very first interview, and I'm going to follow Jimmy for a couple years. And everyone who met him commented to me about how nice he was. A stocky man, he seemed somehow vulnerable. He hung on every word as if it mattered in some profound way. And while he looked at you when you talked, he never made eye contact. I invited Jimmy from the table where he was drinking his coffee with lots of cream and sugar to the room where we talked. And he moved quickly, so we covered the basics of his life quickly. He had a 10th grade education. He'd been arrested about 20 times. High school was hard. He tried the Job Corps, but it wasn't for him. He sold dope, used dope, went to prison for property crimes. After a 3-year sentence for grand larceny, he finished a 6-month drug treatment program, and he was really happy about that. He used lots of treatment language. You could hear it off his lips. He'd say things about the people, places, and things, and his madness, my disease. You could hear this. I had a plan. I'd asked Jimmy about his family and about what it was like for him to grow up on the east side of Detroit. I'd asked about how the city had changed. I'd asked what it was like for him to come home. I'm the only boy, he said quickly, confidently. Jimmy had 4 sisters. When I asked where he was in the pecking order, he told me, I'm the baby. You're the baby, I said, thinking I knew what he was talking about. When I told him, I'm the baby too, meaning I was the baby in my family. We laughed together loudly, 2 middle-aged men in Midtown Detroit, thinking about something from so long ago. But Jimmy stopped laughing abruptly. I was surprised by how quiet he got and how quickly the mood changed. He wiped his eyes aside, leaned his head on his hands. So he took a long pause, tears starting to stream down his cheeks. I was kind of spoiled. I pretty much got everything I wanted. 30 seconds of silence. His dim brown eyes red and full, his voice soft and broken. He went on. When crack came, there was a lot of disappointment. I being the only boy. Is that why you're upset, I asked? This, of course, was a dumb question. I really didn't know what to ask him. I was trying to find my bearings. It's not where I want to be right now, he whimpered after a while. He told me his sisters had helped raise him. They were close growing up and he wanted to keep it that way. That's not how things turned out. Everybody kind of looked up to me, he explained, back to wiping the sides of his face. Like I said, it was a lot of disappointment. Time after time, they give me the benefit of the doubt. Time after time, I shit on them. That's what he said. What about your parents? Well, my father, he was married, but he wasn't married to my mom. I got 4 sisters, Jimmy said. He took care of 2 families, Jimmy told me about his father. He treated my sisters like they were his. He'd go home, but I seen my daddy every day. Were you close, I asked? Yeah, we were close at the time. Now, Jimmy's father had died. It was around 82 or 83, he told me. Jimmy was just starting high school then. He was 14 and at a new school with a mother raising 5 children on her own. Things started getting different. I don't know if it was because my mother didn't really know how to raise a boy. I was the baby, so if I wanted, I'd tell my daddy, and I get it, he'd tell me. But after his father died, I stopped getting the perks. That's what he said. Now, Jimmy's father was an auto worker. This was at a time when people still had pensions. His mother made Jimmy and his 4 sisters take their dead father's last name to ensure they'd be, quote, taken care of financially. That was Jimmy's words. But there were no more perks other than the few $100s that came in the mail each month from the Social Security office. And that went to Jimmy's mother. Jimmy's father, the man who Jimmy saw every day, the one who took care of his sisters as if they were his own, was gone. I wanted to wear the good shit like I've been wearing, he said, but it wasn't that kind of party. It felt like everyone is against me. So Jimmy said, I started doing dumb shit. This is what he said. Jimmy would wait for the mailman to come each month. I figured, well, that's my check. I should be able to do what I want with that money. And I wouldn't think about bills and none of that, he told me, reflecting on his route into trouble. Now, this was the reasoning of a 14-year-old boy, one who lost his father, one who was broke for the first time. He didn't realize that the mailman was delivering his check. He didn't think that the place at which his father developed cancer might have some responsibility to his family even. But the important thing here is that it's not just Jimmy's family. Cancer rates among Black auto workers rival rates in the famed Cancer Alley in the 1980s. This is the 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River of petroleum refineries and chemical plants that claimed lives of the generation of Black men. Auto workers in Detroit were dying. Leukemia, colon and pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, cancer of the stomach, cancer of the liver, brain cancer, cancers of all kinds. This claimed the lives of a generation of Black men in Detroit. This is underreported. I started to steal, he said. Like me and the other guys in the neighborhood, when the mailman comes, we take the mail, try to cash the check ourselves. Now this is a whole group of boys, a group we might call a gang, all of whom had lost their fathers to the auto industry. Jimmy and his friends stole the meager Social Security checks the state sent to their mothers, but that plan didn't work, Jimmy said. No one would cash the check. So here are the boys. Checks with their father's name on it that they couldn't cash. That's when I left high school, he said. Now, the rest of the story is predictable to anybody who's been listening so far. Jimmy ran the streets, stole, started selling dope. By 16, he's using. By 17, he's in jail. By 18, he's in prison. He lied to his family, lost jobs, stole things from people's homes. He used more drugs, did time over and over again. He did 6 months for stealing car radios, 12 months for drug distribution, 18 months for grand larceny, dozens of arrests for trespassing, for using, for stealing scrap metal, for not reporting to his parole officer on time when he was high. And he became harder and harder to support. This is what he told me. What's worse than the guilt from stealing and using and lying, worse than all the consequences that came with it, was the separation that Jimmy felt from his family. He was middle-aged now and the kids were grown, the kids of his sisters. Some were married, some had families, some started jobs, some were very successful. And he smiled and he was happy when he told me this story. Then he said, I don't know, taking a breath. I guess I'm happy on that part, but it's hard. I look at myself and all the potential I had, how I let myself down, and I feel like, wow, I got left behind. Now, I, of course, understood. Jimmy has spent 20 years cycling in and out of different kinds of cages, workforce preparation program, mandated substance abuse treatment, prisons across the state. One was 5 hours from his home. He was in halfway houses, jails, detention centers, almost everything in between. All this time, the baby was separated from his family, and he'd been that way since he was 14 years old. Now, this is Jimmy. This is but one of the 2.3 million people that we held in an American jail or prison. One of the 1.9 million people that we held on any given day last year, in fact. Just one of the nearly 5 million people who are currently on probation or parole. But Jimmy is also one of the 19.6 million Americans estimated to have a felony record in this country. This figure is 10 times the size of the U.S. jail and prison system, but it's a figure that we don't talk about, certainly not in the media. He's one of the 10 million Americans who cycle through an American jail each year. Jails that are overwhelmingly populated by poor people in this country. Again, 80% report being indigents for the purposes of legal defense. Jails that are overwhelmingly filled with people of color in this country. 38% of that prison, of course, is Black. Black Americans being 5 times more likely to be incarcerated, twice as likely to be arrested. They do more time, 10% longer sentences on average in state facilities, 20% longer sentences on average in federal facilities for the same crimes, even when you control for criminal history. These are things we've known for about 20 years. But mass incarceration doesn't stop at the threshold of the Black family. This is what I want to tell you today. 38% of that prison is Black. 38% of that prison is white, representing a full 720,000 white Americans in a jail or prison in this country. If we released every Black American from jail or prison today, we'd still have one of the largest prison systems. In fact, while 1 in 2 Black women have a currently incarcerated loved one, 1 in 8 white women in this country has a loved one who's in jail or prison right now. In fact, while 1 in 2 Black Americans will be arrested before they turn 23 years old, a terrible statistic, 38% of white boys will be arrested before they turn 23. This is certainly a racial justice problem, but it is a decisively American problem. Nearly half the country has an arrest record. Half the country can't come from bad families, y'all. That's not really a possibility. This is the landscape, that's the population, but what do they return to when they come home? 95% of this population will come home. They return to a landscape where there are 44,000 laws, policies, and administrative sanctions that target people with criminal records. This includes 19,000 labor market restrictions. 19,000. In this state, the state of Pennsylvania, there are well over 800. 1,000 bar people from housing. 1,000 separate people from their families. This is the production of precarity. And we've known for 100 years in the criminological research that unemployment, housing instability, lack of access to appropriate medical care, separation from what we might call pro-social bonds, meaning people's families, when they're families that provide positive support, lead to more crime, not less. In our seeking for safety, we've legislated a more dangerous world. And this world didn't just drop out of the sky, but what I'd like to tell you is that we've operated in a social policy of fear. People in this room will remember the 1990s that brought us visions of wayward Black and brown children as super predators who marauded across dystopian urban landscapes. You'll think about today when we talk about disconnected youth and how we respond to them. How we respond to them is incredibly important. This is why I'm never surprised when I run into a kid and learn of their first police encounter. When were you first arrested, I might ask a child. The folks in my sample, I followed 250 people across multiple cities, mainly Chicago and Detroit. But the average age of arrest for a boy was 14 years old. Some boys were arrested as young as 10. I met a guy named Lorenzo, the second brother I'd like to talk to you about today, on my way out the door. By this time, I got used to the script. I asked him, how old were you when you were first arrested? He said, 10. How many times? 15 or 16, he told me. What led to your first arrest? Now, I should say, Zoe was a drug robber. I'm not talking about innocent people right now. He spent 15 years in and out of prisons. And people do incredible things, many of them violent, many of them reprehensible. But this too, like precarity, is a part of a social condition. Zoe had been free for just 32 days, and I want to talk for a second about violence. Here he is, having done his time, having paid his debt. 32 days, he's out. He's free, at least he's almost free. After serving years across 4 maximum security prisons, he's released on 5 years probation. He leaves the prison with a few things. He has bus fare, he has $25 in gate money. He has a voucher from the Illinois Department of Corrections. It's good for 30 days rent. He's given an address to a halfway house in Auburn Gresham. This is a neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. And he's told to report to a parole officer on 80th and Cottage Grove Avenue. Now, this is on the South Side. He's from the West Side. He's not sure that he should go, because the South Side for him is like a foreign land. He's nervous, but he has to go. It's a condition of release. And he knocks on the door and he's wearing khakis, fresh fish khakis, fresh out of prison. He's wearing the kind of plastic boots that give men blisters. And he knocks on the door and the halfway house lets him in and they tell him the rules. You can smoke outside, no pets, no company, no one to visit. Give me your link card. We'll spread the link card. We'll take the link card and we'll share them from among the men. This is how we'll feed you. And he's told that he has to pay his rent. His rent will be $400 due 30 days after he's gotten out. And this is a halfway house. This isn't a regular apartment kind of situation. This is what my grandmother might have called a flop house. That's what she would call it when she was raising me. And we're way past the 30-day mark now. And Zoe has to scramble to figure out where he's gonna get the rent. Zoe had been many things in his life. He had been to prison, he had been to juvenile detention, but he had never been homeless. Never faced it before. And so he gathers all his things in a black plastic bag and he begins to walk the neighborhood thinking about what his next move's gonna be. And he's thinking to himself, where will I get the money? Jobs have told him no, 19,000 labor market restrictions ensure that. He had no money to pay for a new apartment. His loved ones had died during the 15 years he had been in prison. He's walking, he passes the bus stop on 79th and Cottage Grove. And what does he see? He sees 2 dope dealers standing on the corner, flashing their cash. Zoe told me he remembered what to do. At first he said he didn't, but when I pressed him, he said he did. He had muscle memory. He thought to himself, I could choke these dudes out. I could take that money. I need that money. He had never been homeless. What did you do, Zoe? What did you do? I cried, man. I stood on that corner and I cried. Now, I can't leave the story there. I could, but I won't. Zoe gets on the bus and he goes from the south side of Chicago to the far west side of Chicago. It takes him about an hour and a half. And he makes his way to an organization that I call Emmaus Road in the book. And the organization doesn't have room for him. They have a long waiting list, but they say, you know what, Zoe, you're serious about this thing and you need a place to stay. You can sleep on this couch and you can stay here, temporary shelter until a spot opens. A spot opens, they let him into the program. Zoe's now stably housed. He's given 6 months of housing through this program. In 6 months, Zoe starts moving up. He takes classes to improve his life. He improves his education. He gets into therapy. He's given access to drug treatment. Zoe moves up from a resident to a housing manager within that 6 months. He's referred from the 6-month housing program to a 2-year housing program. Zoe is now the program officer or the program director at that organization. Zoe has a fruitful life. He's married, he has children, he has stable employment, and he hasn't committed a crime or been back to prison again. I wish I could tell you the same story about Jimmy, but I can't. Jimmy's mother was his main source of social support. But remember this emphasis on the right to housing and the need to provide shelter for people. And remember the policy apparatus that prevents that from happening. And remember the reason why your work is so important. I asked Jimmy, when was the last time you talked to your mother? He said, it's been a while. I asked him why. He said, I don't come around her like that no more because I don't want to put her in a bad position. I asked him to explain. Here's what he told me. He said that the landlord knew he was sleeping on her couch and started asking questions. Landlord told her if he comes back to visit, he would be forced to evict her. So Jimmy stays away from his mother because she wants to help. This is why your work is important. This is why inaugurated an alternate legal reality. There are 44,000 laws and policies. We need 44,000 laws and policies that target this group. I don't think we do. I think we've inaugurated something like a supervised society. It might be true that this is the landscape right now. It might be true that this is the world that we've made. But organizations like the ones gathered here, folks who provide legal counsel, things like clean slate laws, things like access to housing and affordable health care. These sorts of things make the world different. The need for you is clear. There's a warrant for your existence in this field. We might have a supervised society, but the question I want you to take home with you tonight is what kind of society do we want? And to make that society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I think one of the more powerful things we can do, maybe the most powerful thing we can do as advocates, is to share the stories of our clients. And Dr. Miller, I thank you so much for sharing Jimmy and Zoe's story tonight. I heard once that inherent biases can never be fully remedied. They can only be layered with understanding, continual understanding, continual learning. And you've certainly given us facts, experiences, history tonight to take with us to broaden our knowledge base. And I thank you for that. We give another round of applause for Dr. Miller. Here. It's an honor for me to introduce poet Trapeta B. Mayson, who will read one of her poems for us. Miss Mayson was born in Liberia and immigrated to the United States. She grew up in Philadelphia, studied at Bryn Mawr and Villanova. In addition to her poetry, as a appreciation of the issues faced by many clients that we would see at LASP. She is a licensed clinical social worker and chief officer for a community mental health agency in Philadelphia. She recently served as the City of Philadelphia Poet Laureate. Please join me in welcoming Trapeta B. Mayson.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I actually have two really short poems to do in my 5 minutes. It means a lot to me to be here. I didn't share this story with the organizers, but I am a recipient of your great service. So growing up in Philadelphia, I came to the States with my family when I was just 7 years old, and we lived undocumented for about 16 years. And we received services from Community Legal Service in Philadelphia, that our attorney. And so the two poems that I'm going to read tonight, I'm going to dedicate to this lovely woman who was our attorney for at least 10 of those 16 years, attorney Carol Woods. She was just amazing. She was this angel that came into our lives when we couldn't afford legal representation, and did a lot with stays of deportation and everything else. And that always left a mark on me. And I think about her when I think about service. So I'm going to share two very short poems, and I'm dedicating it also to you for the work that you do. This is called In This Season. In this season of naming and space for the quieted and the muted to be amplified, in this season of shifting, of barrier breaking, undoing, unearthing, uprising, and leveling, you, beloved, may think yourself too small, may think your intentions and acts too slight, may think you are but a fragment, a mere atom in this place of stars and gazers. But what a world you are. What a sphere of shocking beauty and grace. Do you not see how your one song, one breath, one step, one voice, your one pause, one lift, one shout, one protest brought us here, keeps us here? You say that it's only a speck you offer, just a tiny bit, a smidge, a morsel. But do you not see the feast ahead it prepares? How even the remains have purpose, how it beckons all to your grand table, how it feeds us and fills us and expands. Friends, you are a balm in these prickly times. You are a vessel, a refuge, and a respite. Thank you. Some superheroes are gentle birds in flight, battle-worn and capeless, faded S emblazoned across their chest, tarnished shields and haggard, determined steps. Some superheroes are champions of just and right, leaping beyond to lift us up, helping to traverse the terrible and troublesome things. Some superheroes are defenders of people and possibilities with their briefs and stays and pardons, seeking justice for the ordinary and the awesome among us, traveling toward us with a light so bright, a light that leads us and reminds us we too are tender beings. Some superheroes walk among us plain folk, towing our fragile lives, our immigrant lives, our vibrant lives, threatened by injustices and neglect, sitting beside us through trials and tribulations, standing alongside us to amplify our voices. And these superheroes dwell in offices and courtrooms, mediating, negotiating, pleading, reminding this broken system that we too are tender beings. Some superheroes surround themselves with our stories, treat our circumstances like a hymn, sacred and urgent. They know our language and how we are all kin. We are somebody's brother, sister, mother, father. Some superheroes are gentle birds in flight, battle-worn, capeless, faded S emblazoned across their chests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mayson, for your beautiful words. What a great combination with Dr. Miller and Ms. Mayson. Can we give him another round of applause? Thank you again.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, the U.S. Representative for Pennsylvania's 5th District, which includes a good portion of Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania's footprint, including all of Delaware County and parts of Montgomery County and Philadelphia. I'm disappointed to miss tonight's Fête for Justice, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to extend my congratulations to my dear friends at LASP on 20+ years of service to our community. Even before LASP was formed, I had the honor of co-counseling a class action with Delaware County legal assistants with Ann Torregrossa and Michelle Terry for a decade while I was an attorney with the Education Law Center of Pennsylvania. And of course, my former law firm, Ballard Spahr, provided pro bono services when the county legal services organizations merged to form LASP 20 years ago. And during my tenure as pro bono counsel for Ballard Spahr, I regularly consulted with LASP as we served pro bono clients in the region. I also served on the founding board of LASP's sister agency, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, which was formed in response to the restrictions placed on federally funded legal services in 1996. And now my staff and I rely on the expertise of LASP and its attorneys as we serve my constituents in Pennsylvania's 5th District. I really feel as though my public service experience has been intertwined with that of LASP over the past few decades as we jointly try to address the needs of the most vulnerable people in our community. Since coming to Congress in late 2018, I've made it one of my primary goals to advocate for measures and funding to support and make legal services more accessible and effective, including advocating for more eviction relief funding and developing the Congressional administrative record to make clear that money could be used to fund legal aid, supporting efforts to increase legal aid funding every appropriation season, pushing the Biden administration to reestablish the White House Office of Access to Justice, and developing and passing the Justice for Juveniles Act in the House to reduce barriers to civil rights suits for juveniles in custody. I'm also incredibly proud to be co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Access to Legal Aid Caucus and have initiated an effort to expand the membership and impact of that caucus. Right now, too many people, including many of my colleagues in Congress, don't realize that there's no right to counsel for civil legal issues or how grossly underfunded those legal services are. For the past year, the caucus has been developing programs which educate members of Congress about the critical importance of legal services, both to the recipients of those services and to the effectiveness of the laws Congress passes, and the constituent services that members provide. And I'm so grateful for the assistance that LASP and other folks here have provided to that effort. Just last month, the Legal Services Corporation released its 2022 Justice Gap Report, providing a fresh assessment of the unmet civil legal needs of low-income Americans, and the data is sobering. Fully 92% of low-income Americans cannot get adequate or often any help for substantive legal civil problems. And 3/4 of low-income households experienced at least one such issue last year. So we have our work cut out for us. We need to advocate for more robust funding for federal and nonprofit legal services organizations, and we need to roll back the 1996 restrictions on federally funded legal services entities that have hamstrung their effectiveness by banning critical legal tools such as class actions and attorney's fees, or restricted services to some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. To everyone who works for or supports Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania, whether you are fighting for tenants at risk of eviction, assisting formerly incarcerated Pennsylvanians, helping veterans, seniors, and people with disabilities access government benefits, or tackling many issues in between, the work you're doing is changing lives, and I'm honored to be able to support your efforts in the halls of Congress. Thank you to LASP and to all of you who support this hard work for everything you do to increase access to justice in our region. Here's to another 20 years of protecting essential human rights and providing quality legal representation for vulnerable Pennsylvania residents. Thank you.
I believe we're moving into the part of the program where we recognize our honorees. Put them in front. Do you want to line them up in front? We'll ask all the honorees to stand in front of the stage and we'll get a photo of the entire group. Marion Fraley, our communications director, will organize everyone. While they're doing that, I will start with thank yous. I know we're behind a little bit on the schedule. Thank you again to Dr. Miller and Trapeta Mayson for their wonderful contributions to the Fête for Justice. Thank you to our singer from earlier in the evening, Jane Frederick. Thank you to all of our volunteers. If you volunteered tonight, please stand for us. Staff and thank you to serve the staff and board who served on the Fête committees and assisted with sponsorships, ticket sales, and the auction. Many of whom are LASP staff or family of LASP staff. We certainly could not have made tonight special without your commitment. Special thanks to Special Gathering, Danny Johnson, Grace Giermack, and the entire team. The investment of time, the care and attention to detail, the passion with which you address events to recognize and celebrate social justice is an incredible inspiration. We will miss our weekly, now daily meetups with you, but certainly hope we can work together again. The 25th will be here before we know it.
Yeah,
Slam dunk. Thank you so much to our staff on the front lines every day. Your 20 plus years of dedicated service to our clients is the reason we celebrate tonight. A special shout out to our Director of Communication and Development, Marion Fraley and Ann Tiedemann Solomon, and to Keisha James. LASP had never done anything like this before. We had no idea what we were getting into, but you all rose to the occasion and played like champions. Thank you. Thank you once more to our sponsors, particular Champions of Justice, Ballard Spar, Brown & Brown, Penn Community Bank, Trauman Penn, Judith Algeo and Frank Cervone, Flitter Mills and Begley Cardin and Mandio. Thank you to the LASP Board for your leadership, supporting this event, supporting our idea for this project.